Hey everybody, Drew Dinkmeyer here of DailyRoto with the first of a series of MLB DFS tutorials for our 2019 optimizer. This tutorial will be a basic tutorial where we will go through some of the basic settings to just help you generate lineups. We will do an advanced series of tutorials to help you understand some of the nuance and some of the cool things that we've added as features on this year's optimizer. So when you get to the optimizer page, the first thing you'll need to do in the upper left-hand corner is select a slate. You'll see we have slates for DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo available. Projections accompany all those, and you'll be able to run the optimizer to create lineups for any of those. We'll choose DraftKings main slate. From there, you see the player pool here. You have the ability to control the player pool through the checkboxes here. You can, remove all players. You can select all players. You can lock a player, so on and so forth. You will also see that these lineup spots become highlighted in green when a lineup has been confirmed, and otherwise you have the ability to edit those, but we will talk about that more in advanced settings and tutorials. You will see a public percentage column, which is our projected ownership. We have ownership projections this year for DraftKings main slates, only DraftKings main slates. So none of the other sites will have ownership projections, but these are available for those, and you can make some customized settings off them. You'll see this boost column is the ability to move a projection by a percentage point basis. Every click is 1 percentage point up or down. Anytime you make an edit to the projections, you'll have the ability to undo the edit and go right back to our baseline should you choose as well. In addition, you will see the projections on the far right here and our value column just to the left of that. Our value column is simply an expectation based on salary, where a player should get in terms of points and how much more or less that player is projecting for. So in the case of Mike Trout, a $5,600 player, we expect to score 10.05 DraftKings points. He's projecting for 10.75, thus he's a plus 0.70 value. So this screen is where you can control all the player level inputs, but there's plenty of other levels that you can choose to control the settings for. For example, you go into the settings tab and you can control exposures globally. So we have exposures on the player level here, where you can manage an individual player's exposure, but also at the global level here. So let's say you wanted no players to go beyond 30% owned in your runs. You just type in 30, you hit all, and it applies it to every position there. If you wanted to leave it maximum 100, you could simply go back there and it will go back to 100. The same is available for Shuffle. Shuffle is a feature for us that makes it a little bit less likely for a player that was used in the first lineup to be used in the second lineup. The goal of the Shuffle feature is to work a little bit deeper into the player pools. The higher that you shuffle, the more depth you'll get into the player pool, so on and so forth. And this is helpful in trying to create a little bit more of a diversified pool if you should want some. There's lots of ways to do that though. You can also do that with uniques, and uniques is a feature that the number of players in a lineup that is created. So on DraftKings, you have 8 hitters and you have 2 pitchers, so you have 10 players. So for every lineup that the first 10 players, if you had one unique as your setting, the second lineup could have 9 players overlap. One player would have to be unique. You could bump this up to 3, 4, 5, 6, and that will naturally start to create more diversified lineups as players in lineups are changing more frequently. You also have the ability to choose however many lineups you want to run. In this test run, we'll do just 20. You can also optimize a constraint based off max public ownership. So this is the sum, the total of all the individual projected ownerships of the players in your lineup. If you want to run contrarian lineups, you can simply lower this number to 100 or below 100, and you'll start to get naturally contrarian lineups. You can choose to include players with a minimum projection level. This is set to 0, so it's including everyone, but you can also set this to, hey, I want no one that is projected for less than 4 points, and so you won't get any really bad punt plays kind of funneling in. Max order spot, similarly, you can set a constraint here where it starts at default 9, but you can say, hey, I don't want any hitters below 6th in the lineup, so I want all my lineups to have hitters 1 through 6. In them, and you can make that constraint there. You can choose whether you want pitchers versus hitters or not. It comes deselected, but for some of those small slates, you might want to allow hitters to go against your pitcher. You can also choose which level of percentile outcome projections we have. We'll cover these more in depth in advanced tutorials, but we do have range of outcome projections. It sets in defaults to the standard projection, but you can go up to the 75th percentile, 90th percentile projections, and the projections will change alongside those. You may have seen this column light up a little bit more green as you go higher in the percentage. You will see higher projections on the whole. You can also set salary constraints, minimum and maximum. Obviously, the maximum default is 50,000, which is DraftKings maximum salary constraint, but you can change that. Lots of other settings for view here that you can also adjust. And then if you get into any trouble with settings that you want to change, you can always clear stuff here. There's the ability to save settings, so you can save specific settings that you will be able to use day after day after day. You can save like a short slate settings, a full slate settings for whatever your particular run settings are, and we'll cover that more in advanced tutorials. The last thing we want to show before we go through a run is the stacks section, and this is the ability to specifically create stacks in your lineups. These will come defaulted to no stack settings, so when you run the optimizer, you won't get fully built stacks for every lineup, but if you do want to make stacks, you can simply choose here the number of players you want as the primary, and if you want a secondary. You don't have to have a secondary, but if you want a secondary, and this is saying at least 4 players from one team will be on all my lineups, and at least 3 players from another team, a different team, will be in all my lineups. And then you can set total exposures here as well. Remember though, the exposure that you set for a primary and a secondary is cumulative, meaning that 15% in primary and 15% in secondary means I can actually get 30% of my lineups with Cub stacks. 15 would be with 4+, 15 would be with 3+. But you can set team level exposures here. Just make sure that this whole column that you're using goes to greater than 100 so you can actually run. Same with the secondary as well. But these are maximum settings. So however you want to play on a given day, you can control that. I'll set these back to 100 here. And from there, if you want to run, this is telling it to run with stacks. If you wanted it to run without stacks, you would just remove that stack feature, but I'll run these with stacks to show. We'll run 20 lineups. From there, once you click run, you'll get this processing screen that shows you the progress bar to let you know exactly how quickly the lineups are being made. You can see the lineups are made pretty quickly here, and you can see them populate here where we have here a primary stack of the Pittsburgh Pirates with a secondary stack of the Chicago Cubs, and you can see a few iterations of those because I don't have my unique set very high, so you're getting a lot of similar lineups. Then you can see a Cubs with a Reds here. From there, you click on this little group over here for the players, and you can see your overall exposure by player level. So you can see players like Javier Baez have a 95% of my lineup, so he's in 19 of my 20. Same with Albert Almora, Adam Frazier. I did not set very many constraints here, so I'm getting a lot of players overlapping. If you use things like shuffle or uniques, you will be able to get deeper into the player pool than I was on these 20 lineups. But you can sort by position. You can also edit the exposure you want. If you say, hey, 95% of Javi Baez is too much, I want to take that down to 35%. Your next run will cap him at 35%. You can see if you've made any 5-man stacks. In this one, we did not. You can see 4-man stacks. These are all the 4-man stack lineups we have, and these are all the lineups that have a primary of 3. So we got a lot of 4-man stacks in the 4+ as the primary. You can also sort by team, so I can see all my Chicago 4-man stacks. We'll have more display features there as the season goes on, but that should do it for the basic level of the optimizer tutorial here. Go back to the projections. You can kind of start it all over, start the whole process all over if you want. You see that edit on exposure for Javier Baez is carried over. So that is as quickly as I can get through a basic tutorial. As long-winded as I am, I will be back with another advanced tutorial to dive in on some of the deeper features of DailyRoto's MLB DFS optimizer. Thanks for listening. Good luck in all your games this season.